Hook and engaging introduction. You are wandering through the echoing halls of a half-empty German palace at dusk. That quiet figure is Princess Irene of Hesse, and by Rhine, later Princess Henry of Prussia, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, sister to the last Tsarina of Russia, and reluctant custodian of the gene that doomed generations of royal children. Her life slips so easily through the cracks of better-known tragedies that you could mistake it for a footnote until you follow the leading from World War and the desperate wartime hospital where her eldest son drew his final breath. Picture Darmstadt, July 1866. The guns of the Austro-Prussian War have barely cooled when the Grand Ducal Palace welcomes a new child, Princess Alice. Queen Victoria's fiercely progressive third daughter, names the baby Irene, Greek for peace, hoping the fragile post-war truce might stick. Alice insists on plain linen dresses, cold water baths, and hospital rounds for her daughters. Royalty, she believes, must earn its privilege through service. Childhood and early losses, 1866-1878. Princess Irene of Hesse, and by Rhine, born on July 11, 1866, as the third child and second daughter of Princess Alice, daughter of Queen Victoria, and Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse, showed an early, hands-on sense of duty that set her apart from more decorative relatives. By the age of 5 in 1871, young Irene was already assisting her mother in charitable endeavors, particularly during the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War, which had left many soldiers wounded and in need of care. Under Princess Alice's watchful supervision, Irene learned to tie compresses on convalescent soldiers in makeshift hospitals or family-supervised facilities near their Darmstadt residence. This hands-on involvement instilled in her a brisk, no-nonsense form of compassion, efficient, empathetic, and action-oriented, that became a hallmark of her character, setting her apart from cousins who might prioritize courtly elegance over direct aid. These experiences not only exposed her to the realities of suffering and recovery, but also fostered a sense of duty that aligned with her mother's progressive views on nursing and philanthropy, influenced by Alice's own training under Florence Nightingale. The idyllic elements of Irene's early childhood were shattered by profound personal tragedies that introduced the family to grief and the harsh realities of inherited health vulnerabilities. Before Irene reached the age of 10, specifically in May 1873, when she was just 6 years old, her younger brother, Prince Friedrich, known as Friddy, who was 2 years old at the time, suffered a fatal accident at the Neue Palais in Darmstadt. While playing near an open window in their mother's bedroom, Friedrich fell from it, landing on the ground below and sustaining severe injuries. Unbeknownst to the family until then, Friedrich had inherited hemophilia, a blood-clotting disorder passed down through Queen Victoria's lineage, which caused him to bleed internally into his brain without external signs of trauma. He passed away hours later from this silent hemorrhage. It was the Hesse family's first brush with the gene that would later haunt many royal dynasties. This loss profoundly affected the household, cracking the sense of security in the nursery and introducing Irene to the fragility of life at a tender age as she witnessed her parents' anguish and the somber atmosphere that enveloped their home. The family's sorrows compounded in late 1878 when a diphtheria epidemic struck the Grand Ducal household in Darmstadt, claiming more lives and leaving lasting emotional scars. The outbreak began in November, rapidly spreading among the children and staff with symptoms of fever, sore throat, and respiratory distress overwhelming the isolated palace. Irene's youngest sister, Princess Marie, affectionately called May, who was just 4 years old, succumbed to the illness on November 16th, 1878, after a brief but intense battle. Princess Alice, exhausted from nursing her infected children around the clock, drawing on her medical knowledge to administer treatments like tracheotomies and isolation measures, contracted the disease herself while caring for them. Despite her efforts to shield the family, Alice died on December 14th, 1878, at the age of 35, exactly 17 years after her own father, Prince Albert. At this point, Irene was 12 years old and suddenly motherless, thrust into a world of mourning alongside her surviving siblings. In a poignant reflection captured in her writings from that period, Irene described the palace rooms as feeling horribly tidy, as if they were waiting for joy to come home, evoking the eerie stillness and emotional void left by the absences, where everyday objects remained untouched and the household routines continued in a mechanical, joyless manner. Formative years under Queen Victoria, 1879-1887. Following the death of Princess Alice, Queen Victoria, Irene's grandmother, assumed a more direct role in the upbringing of her Hessian granddaughters, gathering them under her authoritative and protective influence to provide structure and continuity amid their loss. From 1879 onward, during Irene's early teenage years, she and her sisters were frequently summoned to stay at royal residences in Britain, such as Osborne House on the Isle of Wight or Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where Victoria imposed a regimented routine designed to instill discipline, resilience, and royal decorum. The girls were dressed in matching serge dresses, practical, modest woolen garments suitable for the damp English weather, for church services at Osborne, emphasizing uniformity and humility over extravagance. Evenings often included bedtime tales, recounted by Victoria herself, drawing from her memories of the Crimean War, including stories of nursing reforms and battlefield heroism that echoed Alice's legacy. The Queen also delivered stern reminders that a princess must never show tears in public, teaching emotional restraint as a cornerstone of royal duty to maintain composure in the face of adversity. The years under Victoria's wing forged Irene's stoicism. They blended her mother's practical compassion with her grandmother's iron resolve. Throughout her teenage years, Irene formed an exceptionally close bond with her younger sister, Princess Alex, later known as Tsarina Alexandra of Russia and nicknamed Sunny for her cheerful disposition in youth, which provided mutual support in the wake of their family's tragedies. The sisters, separated by just 4 years, Irene born in 1866 and Alex in 1872, grew inseparable during their stays in Britain and back in Hesse, engaging in shared activities that fostered their intimacy. They spent winters skating on frozen ponds at Osborne or in the Hessian countryside, gliding across the ice in woolen skirts and mufflers, laughing as they practiced figures and held hands for balance. Amid these playful moments, the sisters made heartfelt vows to one another, promising never to allow marriage or geographical distances to scatter them too far apart, reflecting their deep emotional reliance on each other after losing their mother and siblings. This sibling closeness endured into adulthood, influencing their life choices and correspondence, even as royal obligations eventually pulled them in different directions across Europe. Courtship, marriage, and naval life, 1888. In the spring of 1888, Princess Irene of Hesse and by Rhine experienced an unexpected turn in her personal life with the announcement of her engagement to Prince Heinrich of Prussia. Heinrich, a charismatic and dedicated naval officer in the Imperial German Navy, was the younger brother of the future Kaiser Wilhelm II, adding a layer of prominence to their union within the interconnected European royal families. As first cousins, Irene, being the daughter of Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's second daughter, and Grand Duke Louis IV of Hesse, while Heinrich was the son of Emperor Frederick III, and Victoria, Princess Royal, Queen Victoria's eldest daughter. Their relationship developed quietly amid family gatherings. These included naval regattas and yachting events on the Baltic Sea, or during visits to British and German royal residences, where shared interests in maritime activities and family bonds allowed for discreet courtship away from public scrutiny. The engagement came as a surprise to many outside the immediate family circle, reflecting the era's preference for arranged or semi-arranged royal marriages that balanced affection with diplomatic considerations. And it marked the beginning of Irene's transition from her Hessian upbringing to a life tied to Prussian naval traditions. The couple's wedding took place on a bright May morning in 1888 at Schloss Charlottenburg, a grand Baroque palace in Berlin that served as a fitting venue for Prussian royalty, with its ornate halls and gardens symbolizing the opulence of the German Empire. The ceremony, attended by a host of European royals, including Queen Victoria's extended family, was conducted with the pomp expected of such unions, featuring military uniforms for the groom and his attendants, elaborate gowns for the bride and bridesmaids, and a service blending Lutheran traditions with royal protocols. Guests who attended later affectionately referred to it as the wedding of the very amiables, a nickname derived from the evident joy and warmth displayed by the bride and groom. Throughout the event, Irene and Heinrich were observed grinning like delighted children whenever their eyes met, exchanging glances filled with genuine affection that contrasted with the more formal demeanors often seen in royal weddings of the time. This light-hearted atmosphere highlighted the personal compatibility between the couple, who shared a mutual respect and enthusiasm for naval life, setting a positive tone for their future together. Following the wedding, the newly christened Princess Henry of Prussia, adopting the anglicized form of her husband's name, as was customary, relocated to Kiel, a major naval port city on the Baltic Sea that served as the headquarters of the Imperial German Navy. This move in 1888 immersed her in the rhythms of military life, where Heinrich's career as a naval officer dictated frequent relocations, social obligations tied to ship launches and fleet reviews, and a community centered around officers' families. Naval existence suited Irene's practical and compassionate nature, honed from her childhood experiences in nursing and family duties. She embraced the structured environment, participating in charitable work for sailors' families, organizing events at the naval base, and supporting her husband's ambitions amid the growing naval arms race between Germany and Britain. Despite the demands of this lifestyle, including separations during Heinrich's sea voyages and the formalities of court life in Berlin, Irene found fulfillment in building a stable home, drawing on her resilience developed under Queen Victoria's guidance and her close bond with her sister Alex. Motherhood and the Royal Disease, 1889 to 1900. The couple's family life began to expand with the birth of their first son, Prince Waldemar, in 1889, an event that brought initial joy but soon introduced the persistent shadow of hemophilia, the inherited bleeding disorder known as the Royal Disease, due to its prevalence in Queen Victoria's descendants. Delivered in Kiel amid the excitement of new parenthood, Waldemar appeared healthy at first, but as he grew into toddlerhood, he began exhibiting telltale signs of the condition, such as unexplained bruises from minor bumps and prolonged bleeding from small cuts. This diagnosis confirmed Irene's role as a carrier of the hemophilia gene, passed unknowingly from her mother, Princess Alice, and ultimately from Queen Victoria. Turning was what should have been carefree early years into a period of vigilant monitoring and medical interventions. Irene's practical compassion shone through as she managed Waldemar's care, adapting household routines to minimize risks while grappling with the emotional toll of watching her child suffer from a condition that medical science of the era could only mitigate, not cure. 7 years after Waldemar's arrival, Irene gave birth to their second son, Prince Sigismund, in 1896, during a time when the family was well established in Kiel's naval society. Unlike his older brother, Sigismund displayed no immediate signs of hemophilia, appearing robust and healthy from infancy, which provided a measure of relief amid the ongoing anxiety surrounding the disease. His birth strengthened the family's dynamics, with Irene balancing her duties as a naval wife, attending official functions, and supporting Heinrich's rising career, which included commands on various warships, with the hands-on parenting required for her sons. Sigismund's vitality allowed for more typical childhood activities, such as outdoor play and family outings, though Irene remained cautiously protective, informed by her experiences with Waldemar and the broader family history of hemophilia that had claimed her brother Friedrich in childhood. The family's hopes for expansion turned to heartbreak with the birth of their third son, Prince Heinrich, in early 1900, whose brief life underscored the relentless grip of hemophilia on Irene's maternity. Initially a cause for celebration, Heinrich's arrival was soon marred by the disease's manifestations. Just months old, he suffered a minor fall, a common occurrence in infancy, that triggered uncontrollable internal bleeding due to his inability to clot properly. Despite frantic medical efforts, the infant prince died 4 days before Christmas in December 1900, plunging the family into profound grief during what should have been a festive season. In a deeply personal act of mourning, Irene trimmed a lock of Heinrich's hair as a keepsake, carefully hiding it in a Russian lacquer box on her writing desk, a poignant reminder of her lost child that she would carry with her throughout life. This tragedy, occurring in the family's Kiel residence, intensified Irene's sorrow and reinforced the emotional burdens she bore as a mother in a hemophilia-afflicted lineage. Contrary to some popular myths that have persisted in historical accounts, only Princes Waldemar and Heinrich inherited the fatal hemophilia gene, while Sigismund escaped the condition entirely and lived to the age of 82, enjoying a long life that included marriage and children. This clarification highlights the selective nature of the disease's transmission, as hemophilia is passed from carrier mothers to sons via the X chromosome with a 50% chance for each male child. Nevertheless, Irene endured each of her pregnancies with profound fear, haunted by the possibility that her own blood, carrying the invisible genetic flaw, could turn against her unborn children, leading to lives of fragility or early death. This anxiety permeated her maternal experiences, blending joy with dread, and shaped her approach to family life, where she emphasized caution, medical preparedness, and emotional resilience drawn from her early losses and Queen Victoria's teachings on Stoicism. Sisters on Separate Thrones, 1894-1912. In 1894, Princess Alix of Hesse and by Rhine, affectionately nicknamed Sunny for her bright disposition and youth, entered into a significant royal union that would profoundly shape her life and deepen her bond with her sister Irene. On November the 26th, 1894, following the death of Tsar Alexander III and the ascension of his son, Alix married Tsarevich Nicholas II of Russia in a grand ceremony at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Petersburg. Amid the opulent settings of the Russian court, with its gilded halls, orthodox rituals, and attending nobility from across Europe, This marriage transformed Alex into Empress Alexandra Feodorovna, consort to the new Tsar, thrusting her into the intricate and often isolating world of Russian imperial politics, where she navigated the expectations of producing an heir while maintaining close ties to her Hessian roots. The event marked a geographical separation from Irene, fulfilling the sisters' childhood fears of marriage scattering them. Yet it strengthened their emotional connection through frequent correspondence and shared family concerns, as Alexandra adapted to her new role with a mix of devotion to Nicholas and lingering homesickness for Darmstadt and her siblings. The sisterly bond between Irene and Alexandra was tested and fortified in 1904 with the birth of Alexandra's long-awaited son and heir, Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich, on July 30th at Peterhof Palace near St. Petersburg, Petersburg. Amid initial celebrations for securing the Romanov succession after 4 daughters, the joy was short-lived when Alexei was diagnosed with hemophilia shortly after birth, exhibiting symptoms like prolonged bleeding from his navel, a condition inherited through the same genetic line that had afflicted Irene's sons and their uncle Friedrich. Desperate and isolated in the vast Russian court, where the disease was kept a closely guarded secret to avoid political instability, Alexandra turned first to her sister Irene for counsel and emotional support, recognizing Irene's first-hand experience as a mother of hemophiliac children. This shared burden created an intimate alliance, with Irene offering practical advice on managing bleeds, protective measures, and the psychological strain of constant vigilance, drawing from her own Kiel household routines and medical consultations, thus reinforcing their unbreakable sisterhood across borders. Throughout Alexei's childhood, from 1904 onward, Irene and Alexandra maintained a lifeline of communication adapted to the secrecy surrounding the Tsarevich's condition, employing coded telegrams to discuss his health without risking interception by courtiers or the press. These messages used innocuous, nature-inspired phrases to convey urgent medical updates. For instance, "Our little one stumbled on the daisies," signaled the onset of a bleed, allowing the sisters to share concerns discreetly while preserving the imperial facade of strength. Amid the anxiety, they injected dark humor into their exchanges, joking that their husbands, Prince Heinrich and Tsar Nicholas, might eventually outlaw everyday hazards like table corners and staircases to prevent accidents that could trigger hemorrhages. This blend of coded urgency and wry levity highlighted their coping mechanisms, rooted in shared childhood resilience under Queen Victoria's stoic influence, and underscored the emotional depth of their relationship, where empathy for each other's maternal fears bridged the physical distance between Prussia and Russia. The fragility of Alexei's condition reached a critical point in October 1912 during a hunting trip at the Imperial Lodge in Spala, Poland, where the 8-year-old Tsarevich suffered a severe internal hemorrhage after a minor fall from a boat, leading to days of excruciating pain, high fever, and near death as blood pooled in his leg joint. Isolated in the remote estate, Alexandra faced the ordeal with mounting despair, as court physicians offered limited relief through morphine injections, and the controversial mystic Grigory Rasputin sent telegraphed prayers claiming to stem the bleeding from afar. In this moment of crisis, Alexandra summoned Irene, who raced across Europe by train from Kiel through Germany and into Russian territory, enduring long journeys and border formalities to reach her sister's side. Upon arrival, Irene provided hands-on comfort, holding Alexandra's hand during vigil-filled nights, offering words of reassurance drawn from her own losses, and assisting with nursing duties while the family awaited Alexei's stabilization. This act of solidarity not only aided Alexandra through the trauma, but also exemplified the profound sisterhood that transcended national boundaries and personal hardships. War, revolution, and family catastrophe. 1914, 1918. The eruption of World War I in August 1914, sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and escalating alliances, pitted Germany and Russia against each other in brutal conflict, transforming Irene and Alexandra, sisters bound by blood, into nominal enemy aliens overnight. Irene, residing in Kiel as a Prussian princess married to a high-ranking German naval officer, found herself aligned with the Central Powers, while Alexandra, as Russian empress, stood with the Allies, creating a painful rift amid the propaganda-fueled hatred between their adopted nations. Despite the hostilities, which included naval blockades, trench warfare, and widespread mobilization, the sisters refused to sever their familial ties, adapting to wartime restrictions by continuing to exchange tiny photographs of their children, snapshots capturing everyday moments like Waldemar's naval training or Alexei's rare healthy days, delivered through neutral couriers via countries like Sweden or Switzerland. These covert communications preserved a thread of normalcy and love, allowing glimpses into each other's lives, until the escalating chaos made even such discreet channels untenable. As World War I dragged on, the February Revolution of 1917 in Russia toppled the Romanov monarchy, leading to Nicholas II's abdication and the family's house arrest, which irreparably cut every line of communication between Irene and Alexandra. The revolution's turmoil, marked by strikes, mutinies, and the rise of the provisional government, disrupted postal services, diplomatic channels, and neutral courier routes, leaving Irene in anguished uncertainty about her sister's fate from her vantage in war-torn Germany. This severance compounded the emotional strain, as Irene, already managing her own family's wartime hardships, including Heinrich's naval duties and rationing in Kiel, could no longer offer or receive the mutual support that had defined their relationship, shifting their bond from active correspondence to silent prayers amid the broader devastation of the conflict. The culmination of the Russian Revolution's violence struck Irene with devastating force in July 1918, when Bolshevik guards, under orders from the Soviet leadership, executed Empress Alexandra, Tsar Nicholas, their 5 children, including the hemophiliac Alexei, and several retainers in the basement of the Ipatiev house in Ekaterinburg. This cold-blooded massacre, carried out on July 17th, amid fears of White Army advances, involved gunfire and bayonets, in a chaotic scene later detailed in investigations, ending the Romanov dynasty and sending shockwaves through Europe's remaining monarchies. News of the deaths reached Irene via fragmented reports and official telegrams, confirming the loss of her beloved Sonny and the entire family branch, a tragedy that echoed the hemophilia struggles they had shared and amplified Irene's grief over the senseless brutality of revolutionary fervor. Just a week after Alexandra's execution, on July 18, 1918, Irene endured another harrowing blow with the murder of their elder sister, Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna, known as Ella, who had become a nun and philanthropist after her husband's assassination in 1905. Bolshevik forces hurled Ella, along with other Romanov relatives and companions, down a Siberian mine shaft near Alapayevsk, followed by grenades and flames in a gruesome attempt to conceal the bodies as part of the wider purge of imperial figures during the Red Terror. Upon receiving the telegram bearing this news, likely delayed through wartime censors, Irene responded with characteristic stoicism, carefully folding the document and placing it within her prayer book as a somber memento, integrating the loss into her daily spiritual reflections. Rather than succumbing to paralysis, she turned to practical tasks, weeding the vegetable patch in her Kiel garden, reasoning that the cabbages will not wait for grief. This act symbolized her enduring resilience, channeling sorrow into productive labor amid food shortages and personal devastation. Much like the horribly tidy rooms of her childhood mourning, ensuring survival for her remaining family in a world forever altered by war and revolution. The Anastasia controversy, 1920s-1990s. In 1925, 7 years after the execution of the Romanov family during the Russian Revolution, a woman named Anna Anderson, who was working as a factory laborer in Poland after earlier periods of instability, including a suicide attempt in Berlin, publicly claimed to be Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna, the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra Feodorovna. This assertion captured international attention as Anderson alleged she had miraculously survived the 1918 massacre in Ekaterinburg by being shielded during the gunfire and later escaping with the help of sympathetic guards, only to suffer amnesia and hardship in the ensuing years. Her story fueled widespread speculation and hope among monarchist circles and the public, who were still grappling with the loss of the Russian imperial family, and it quickly became a sensational topic in newspapers across Europe and beyond. As one of the closest surviving relatives, being Anastasia's aunt through her sister Alexandra, Princess Irene of Prussia was seen as uniquely positioned to verify or debunk the claim, given her intimate knowledge of the Romanov children's appearances, mannerisms, and family anecdotes from pre-war gatherings. Recognizing the importance of addressing the claim directly to quell the growing controversy, Princess Irene agreed to a personal meeting with Anna Anderson in 1925, arranged in Berlin under controlled circumstances to ensure privacy amid the media frenzy. The encounter was fraught with tension as Irene approached it with a mix of skepticism and emotional weight, haunted by the memories of her niece's presumed fate and the broader family tragedies of 1918. Upon seeing Anderson, Irene took only one glance before whispering firmly, "You are not my niece," a statement that reflected her immediate conviction based on physical dissimilarities, such as differences in eye color, facial structure, and scars, as well as inconsistencies in Anderson's recollections of family details that Irene knew intimately. This dismissal was reported vividly in Berlin tabloids, which described it as having struck like ice water, evoking the cold, shocking finality of Irene's words that dashed the hopes of Anderson's supporters and intensified the divide between believers and detractors in the public eye. The Anastasia mystery persisted as a heated controversy for decades following the 1925 meeting, evolving into legal battles, books, films, and forensic debates that kept the story alive well into the 20th century, with Anderson gaining allies among some Romanov exiles and even pursuing court cases in Germany to claim inheritance rights. Despite mounting evidence against Anderson, including linguistic analyses showing her native Polish accent rather than Russian, and later DNA tests in the 1990s posthumously confirming she was unrelated to the Romanovs, supporters continued to argue her case based on anecdotal resemblances and conspiracy theories about Bolshevik cover-ups. Throughout this prolonged saga, Irene never wavered in her position, refusing to engage further in public disputes or reconsider her judgment, even as the controversy occasionally resurfaced in the press or through new claimants. Her steadfast denial, rooted in personal familiarity and grief, served as a key anchor for skeptics and underscored her commitment to family truth amid the sensationalism. Widowhood and World War II, 1929 to 1945. Princess Irene faced a profound personal loss in 1929 when her husband, Prince Heinrich of Prussia, died on April 20th at the age of 66 after a battle with throat cancer, a condition that had progressively weakened him in his later years, despite medical treatments available at the time. Heinrich, who had retired from his distinguished naval career after World War I and the fall of the German monarchy in 1918, passed away at their family estate, Schloss Himmelmark, in Schleswig-Holstein, surrounded by Irene and their surviving sons. His death not only ended a 41-year marriage, characterized by mutual support through family health crises and wartime separations, but also left Irene as a widow at 62, navigating the emotional void while assuming full responsibility for the family's affairs in an era of economic instability following the Weimar Republic's challenges and the onset of the Great Depression. In the aftermath of World War I and the abolition of European monarchies, financial ruin became a common plight for many aristocratic widows, like Irene, who lost state pensions, properties, and privileges tied to the old regimes, forcing them to adapt to reduced circumstances amid inflation and asset devaluations. After Heinrich's death in 1929, Irene confronted these realities head-on at Schloss Himmelmark, their lakeside estate that required significant upkeep, including staff salaries, maintenance, and taxes in a faltering economy. To keep the property afloat and sustain her household, she made the difficult decision to sell heirloom jewels, precious family pieces inherited from Queen Victoria and Prussian royals, such as diamond tiaras and pearl necklaces that held sentimental value but provided necessary funds through auctions or private sales. This pragmatic approach reflected her lifelong practicality, prioritizing survival over luxury in a time when many former royals faced similar downsizing or exile. As Germany transitioned through the Weimar era into the Nazi period and eventually World War II from 1939 to 1945, Irene channeled her energies into community support, embodying the compassionate service she had learned in childhood while adapting to her diminished status. She opened the orchards at Schloss Himmelmark to local children, allowing them to pick fruit during seasons of scarcity, fostering a sense of generosity and normalcy amid economic hardships and later wartime rationing. Additionally, Irene personally participated in relief efforts, such as peeling potatoes for refugee soup kitchens that aided displaced persons fleeing conflict zones or urban bombings, using her estate's resources to prepare and distribute meals. These acts not only helped sustain the local population in Schleswig-Holstein, but also aligned with her history of nursing and philanthropy, providing her with purpose during years marked by political turmoil, air raids, and the broader devastation of the war. Last Years in Personal Memorials, 1945, 1953. The final years of World War II brought yet another heartbreaking loss to Irene when her eldest son, Prince Waldemar, died in May 1945 at the age of 56 in a clinic in Tutzing, Bavaria, where he had been receiving treatment for a severe hemophilia-related bleed exacerbated by the chaos of the war's end. As Allied forces advanced and liberated concentration camps, American medics diverted critical supplies, including typoplasma essential for Waldemar's transfusion, to prioritize the urgent needs of newly freed prisoners suffering from starvation and disease. Without the plasma, Waldemar's internal hemorrhage could not be controlled, leading to his death amid the collapsing Third Reich and the influx of refugees. This event, occurring just as the war concluded with Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945, compounded Irene's lifetime of hemophilia tragedies. echoing the losses of her brother Friedrich, nephew Alexei, and son Heinrich. In the immediate aftermath of Waldemar's death, Irene grappled with profound grief while witnessing the natural beauty around Schloss Himmelmark, where she watched the lake's waters turn a rose-gold hue in the sunset, a serene contrast to the human suffering she had endured. In a murmured reflection captured in family accounts, she expressed a bittersweet solace. "At least no cannon can reach him now," alluding to the end of wartime bombardments and the peace that death brought her son, free from the ongoing threats of injury and the cannons symbolizing the violence that had defined much of her era. This quiet acceptance highlighted her enduring stoicism, forged through decades of personal and historical upheavals, as she continued to manage her estate and reflect on a life marked by resilience in the face of relentless loss. Following the tragedies of World War II, including the death of her son Waldemar in 1945, Princess Irene returned to her estate at Schloss Himmelmark on the Baltic coast in Schleswig-Holstein, where she sought solace in reflective and purposeful activities amid the post-war reconstruction of Germany. In the years immediately after the war, from 1945 onward, she planted 33 rose bushes in the estate's gardens, each one symbolizing a year that Waldemar had outlived the grim childhood predictions associated with his hemophilia, which doctors had once suggested would claim his life early. This act served as a private memorial, transforming the landscape into a living tribute to her son's resilience and the maternal vigilance that had extended his life despite the disease's constant threats. Additionally, Irene dedicated time to cataloging her mother, Princess Alice's wartime letters, meticulously organizing correspondence from the Franco-Prussian War and other periods that detailed Alice's nursing efforts and family hardships. These documents, preserved with care in her later years, reflected Irene's own experiences with loss and duty, as she added personal annotations that provided insight into her emotional world, legacy, and lessons post-1953. In the decades following Irene's death on November 11, 1953, at the age of 87, scholars and researchers began accessing her meticulously maintained archives at Himmelmark and other repositories, uncovering the depth of her contributions as a quiet custodian of family history. Among the discoveries was Irene's own margin note in one of her mother's letters. "Pain shared is still pain, but it is also purpose." This poignant reflection, written in her distinctive handwriting, encapsulated her philosophy on enduring grief through communal bonds and meaningful action, drawing from her lifetime of supporting hemophiliac children and bereaved relatives. These archives, including letters, diaries, and medical records related to hemophilia in the royal family, became invaluable primary sources for geneticists studying the inheritance patterns of the disease, often called the royal disease, and its spread through Queen Victoria's descendants. Social historians also drew upon them to explore themes of women's roles in aristocracy, the impact of inherited disorders on dynastic stability, and the personal toll of public life, ensuring Irene's legacy extended beyond her immediate family to inform academic understandings of 19th and 20th century European history. Irene's life, spanning from 1866 to 1953, highlighted the profound and often overlooked ways in which heredity functioned as history's most understated assassin, subtly reshaping political landscapes and personal destinies. The hemophilia gene, inherited unwittingly through Queen Victoria's lineage and passed to Irene and her sister Alexandra, manifested in their sons, Waldemar, Heinrich, and Tsarevich Alexei, creating vulnerabilities that influenced major events. In Russia, Alexei's condition fueled Alexandra's reliance on Rasputin, contributing to court superstitions, political instability, and the erosion of public trust in the Romanov dynasty, which played a role in its eventual toppling during the 1917 revolution. Irene's experiences underscored how a single rogue gene in the opulent nurseries of Europe's palaces could cascade into broader consequences, from family heartbreaks to the destabilization of empires, reminding historians that biological factors often intertwined with geopolitical forces in ways that headlines of wars and revolutions rarely captured. Through her reflections, preserved in diaries and letters, Irene illustrated that royalty provided no true shield against the everyday hardships of motherhood, including the menial tasks and profound heartbreaks that defined her existence. Despite her elevated status as a Prussian princess, she routinely engaged in practical duties, such as scrubbing buckets during nursing efforts in World War I or peeling potatoes for refugees in World War II, demonstrating that aristocratic privilege did not exempt her from the physical and emotional labors faced by ordinary women. Her life emphasized the universal nature of parental grief, particularly in managing hemophilia's relentless threats, where the fear of a child's minor injury could overshadow courtly grandeur, reinforcing the idea that personal vulnerabilities pierced through the veneer of royal invincibility. Irene's commitment to meticulous record-keeping, documenting family medical histories, correspondences, and personal notes emerged as a subtle yet impactful legacy, proving that such quiet endeavors could hold as much historical weight as dramatic battlefield charges or political upheavals. In an era dominated by grand narratives of emperors and revolutions, her archives offered intimate insights into the human elements behind those events, influencing genetic research, biographical studies, and understandings of royal intermarriages. This reflective aspect of her life suggested that preservation and reflection, often conducted in the margins away from public acclaim, contributed enduringly to collective knowledge, equating the power of a pen in a private study to the sword on a public stage. For those seeking to connect with Irene's story in the present day, a visit to the Baltic coast near Himmelmark reveals tangible symbols of her life's themes, particularly the rose wall she cultivated as a memorial. Beneath the largest bush lies a granite marker engraved with the initials W for Waldemar and H for Heinrich, her hemophiliac sons who succumbed to the disease, alongside a deliberate blank space where S for Sigismund was never carved, honoring the one son who lived a full life untouched by the condition. Standing there, amid the hush of waves lapping at the lake shore, evokes the multilingual lullabies Irene might have sung, blending German from her Prussian home, English from her British grandmother, and Russian from her sister's adopted land, symbolizing the interconnected European royal world she inhabited. This silence encapsulates the truth Irene internalized after Alexei's diagnosis in 1904 and reinforced through her own losses. The most powerful force in the world is not the might of empires or the fury of revolutions, but the crimson thread of blood and affection that ties one heartbeat to another, and the terrible echoing hush that follows when that thread is severed by disease, war, or fate.